Nathan Park had been the most beloved teacher at Lincoln Elementary School for 12 years. The kind of teacher children remember decades later, the one who stayed late to help struggling students, who paid for classroom supplies out of his own pocket, who believed that every child could succeed if given the right support and encouragement. Then Principal Gerald Morrison destroyed him. It happened over the course of one brutal month. First came the accusations: inappropriate conduct with students. The claims were vague but damning. A parent complained that Nathan made her daughter uncomfortable. Another said he'd been too friendly with her son. A third claimed he'd kept students after class without proper supervision. Nathan was stunned. In 12 years, he'd never had a complaint. He ran his classroom by the book, always kept his door open, never met with students alone. He'd been so careful, especially as a male elementary school teacher in an era when such caution was necessary. But Principal Morrison didn't investigate thoroughly, didn't interview the children, didn't review the security footage that would have shown a Nathan's classroom door, always open, always visible. Instead, Morrison placed Nathan on immediate administrative leave, pending investigation. The local news picked up the story. Elementary teacher accused of misconduct. Nathan's photo, his smiling face from the school directory, was plastered across websites and TV screens. Parents were interviewed expressing outrage. The teachers' union tried to defend him, but public opinion had already turned. Then came the manufactured evidence. A parent, Nathan later learned she was Morrison's cousin, claimed to have text messages from Nathan to her daughter. The messages were inappropriate, suggestive, except Nathan had never texted any student, ever. He didn't even have his students' phone numbers. The forensic analysis showed the messages were fabricated, but by then it was too late. The school board, under pressure from Morrison and wanting to avoid a scandal, offered Nathan a choice: resign quietly with a neutral recommendation letter, or face a formal hearing that would drag through the media for months. Nathan's lawyer advised him to take the resignation.
Even if you win the hearing, the accusation will follow you forever. No school will hire you. But if you resign quietly, maybe you can start over somewhere else.
So Nathan resigned, signed the papers, walked out of Lincoln Elementary for the last time while students he'd taught for years watched confused, some crying, most not understanding why their favorite teacher was suddenly gone. The truth came out 6 months later, but quietly, buried in a school board meeting minutes that no media outlet covered. The accusations had been fabricated. The concerned parents were associates of Principal Morrison. The text messages were faked. Nathan Park had been completely innocent. Why? Because Morrison had wanted to hire his nephew for Nathan's position, a coveted 5th grade role with the best classroom and highest test scores in the district. But Nathan had tenure and couldn't simply be fired. So Morrison had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to force Nathan out. The revelation came too late. Nathan's reputation was destroyed. His teaching license had been voluntarily surrendered as part of the resignation agreement. No school would touch him with his name still associated with misconduct allegations, even debunked ones. Internet searches for Nathan Park teacher still brought up the original accusatory articles, not the quiet retraction. Nathan spent a year trying to rebuild. He applied to over 200 teaching positions nationwide. Everyone rejected him, usually without explanation, sometimes with pointed questions about the Lincoln Elementary situation. He worked as a substitute teacher for a while, but parents would recognize him and complain. He tried tutoring, but the first family that Googled his name immediately canceled. Eventually, he took a job at a bookstore, then at a coffee shop. Jobs that didn't require background checks or explanations. Jobs where he could be anonymous. He was 42 years old, with a master's degree in education and 12 years of exemplary teaching experience, working for minimum wage and trying to figure out how to live with the injustice of what had been done to him. Nathan thought about revenge constantly, fantasized about exposing Morrison, about suing, about going to the media with the truth. But his lawyer advised against it.
The school board retraction was confidential. If you break that confidentiality, they'll sue you. You have no money for a lawsuit. And realistically, even if you win, your reputation is already destroyed. You can't unring that bell.
So Nathan lived with the anger, the bitterness, the unfairness of a good man destroyed by a corrupt system that never faced consequences. That all changed on a Tuesday morning when Nathan saw Principal Gerald Morrison at the coffee shop where Nathan worked. Morrison didn't recognize him. Why would he? Nathan had lost weight, grown a beard, looked nothing like the confident teacher he'd once been. Morrison ordered his coffee, complicated, demanding, treating Nathan like he was invisible, and sat down to work on his laptop. Nathan stood behind the counter, hands shaking with rage as he made Morrison's overpriced latte. Here was the man who'd destroyed his life, who'd fabricated evidence, who'd ruined his reputation and career. And Morrison didn't even remember him, didn't spare a thought for the life he'd demolished. Nathan could spit in the coffee, could confront him, could make a scene. Instead, he did something that surprised himself. He made Morrison's coffee perfectly, added an extra shot of espresso, drew a little heart in the foam, a habit from his training he couldn't quite break. As he handed Morrison the cup, Nathan said quietly,
"Have a great day, sir."
Morrison barely looked up.
Yeah, thanks.
Nathan watched him work for an hour, typing, making phone calls, looking important and successful and completely unburdened by what he'd done. And Nathan made a decision. Not revenge. Not exactly. Something different. Something that would destroy Gerald Morrison more thoroughly than any lawsuit or exposure ever could. Nathan was going to kill him with kindness. That evening, Nathan did something he hadn't done in 2 years. He opened his laptop and started planning like a teacher again. Not a lesson plan, a revenge plan. But not the kind anyone would expect. He created a document titled The Kindness Conspiracy and began writing. Goal: destroy Gerald Morrison's life by making him the most beloved, grateful, and ultimately guilt-ridden person in the community. Method: systematically improve Morrison's life through anonymous acts of kindness until he's forced to recognize the goodness in the world and the evil of his own actions. Outcome: Morrison either confesses his crimes out of guilt or becomes such a changed person that he voluntarily makes amends. Either way, justice is served through transformation, rather than destruction. Nathan knew it sounded crazy. Probably was crazy. But traditional revenge had never appealed to him. He didn't want to destroy Morrison the way Morrison had destroyed him. He didn't want to become the villain of his own story. Instead, Nathan would weaponize the very qualities that had made him a great teacher. patience, creativity, and the fundamental belief that people could change when shown consistent kindness and given opportunities for growth. Over the next week, Nathan researched Gerald Morrison's life with the thoroughness of a teacher preparing a semester-long curriculum. Morrison lived alone in a modest house in the suburbs, divorced 5 years ago, estranged from his adult children. He drove a 12-year-old Honda that desperately needed repairs. He ate lunch alone at his desk every day. He had no visible social life, no friends who called or visited. For a man who destroyed Nathan's life to get a coveted job placement for his nephew, Morrison seemed oddly isolated and joyless himself. Nathan's first act of anonymous kindness was simple. He paid Morrison's overdue parking tickets, all 7 of them. $520 that Nathan could barely afford, paid online with a prepaid card that couldn't be traced. 2 days later, Morrison received a notice that his tickets had been paid by a concerned citizen who believes in second chances. Nathan watched Morrison's reaction at the coffee shop. Confusion, suspicion. Then briefly, something that looked like tears. The second act was more elaborate. Nathan learned that Morrison's Honda needed significant repairs, over $2,000 according to the estimate Nathan glimpsed when Morrison left it on the coffee shop table. The car was Morrison's only transportation. He couldn't afford the repairs on his principal's salary, not after the divorce settlement. Nathan couldn't afford it either. But he did something creative. He started a crowdfunding campaign titled, "Help a Dedicated Educator Get to Work." He didn't use Morrison's name or photo. He just told a story about a struggling principal who devoted his career to children but couldn't afford to fix his car. Nathan promoted it on community message boards, local Facebook groups, teacher forums. He donated the first $100 himself, money he'd been saving for textbooks he could no longer use. Within a week, the campaign raised $2,500. Teachers from across the country donated $10 or $20 each, writing messages like, "Educators support educators," and "Thank you for your service to children." Nathan used the money to pay Morrison's repair shop directly, including a note. From the teaching community, we take care of our own. When Morrison picked up his fully repaired car, according to Nathan's sources, the repair shop receptionist who frequented the coffee shop, he broke down crying in the parking lot. The third act targeted Morrison's isolation. Nathan discovered that Morrison's birthday was coming up. He was turning 56. From what Nathan could tell, Morrison would spend it alone. So Nathan organized a surprise birthday celebration at the coffee shop. He made a cake. He invited some of Morrison's colleagues from Lincoln Elementary by sending anonymous invitations that said, "Help us celebrate someone who needs to know they're appreciated." A dozen teachers showed up, people who worked with Morrison but weren't necessarily friends. They were confused about who'd organized it, but they came. When Morrison walked into the coffee shop for his usual morning coffee and found a birthday party waiting for him, he looked stunned. The teachers sang happy birthday. Someone had brought presents. Small things like a nice pen set and a Starbucks gift card. Nathan watched from behind the counter as Morrison tried not to cry, stammering his thanks, looking overwhelmed by this unexpected kindness.
I don't understand,"
Morrison said.
"Who organized this?"
No one knew. The invitations had been anonymous, But the teachers assured him it didn't matter. They were happy to celebrate with him. For just a moment, as Morrison looked around at his colleagues showing up for him, Nathan felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction in his revenge plan, but genuine sadness for how lonely this man was. How isolated he'd made himself through his cruelty and corruption. Still, Nathan pressed on with phase 2 of his plan. Over the next 3 months, Nathan became Morrison's secret guardian angel. When Morrison's roof started leaking, an anonymous community fund paid for repairs. When his mother got sick and he couldn't afford the flights to visit her, plane tickets mysteriously appeared in his school mailbox. When the Lincoln Elementary budget couldn't cover new library books, a donation arrived with a note. For Principal Morrison's excellent leadership. Each act of kindness was accompanied by a message. Pay it forward. Share the blessing. Pass on the compassion. Nathan watched Morrison's transformation with the careful attention of a teacher monitoring a student's progress. At first, Morrison was suspicious. He tried to figure out who was behind the kindness. He asked his colleagues, investigated, even filed a police report, wondering if it was some kind of elaborate scam. But as weeks passed with no demands, no catches, no revelations, Morrison began to accept it. And more importantly, he began to change. It started small. He began saying please and thank you to the coffee shop staff. He started smiling more. He held doors open for people, small acts of basic courtesy that he apparently hadn't practiced in years. Then it grew. He started a kindness initiative at Lincoln Elementary, encouraging students to do anonymous good deeds for each other. He personally funded a scholarship for a struggling student. He organized a food drive for families in need. Nathan watched it all, documenting Morrison's transformation like a scientist recording an experiment. And he felt conflicted. On one hand, this was working. Morrison was becoming a better person. The kindness he'd received was inspiring him to be kind to others. On the other hand, Morrison still hadn't acknowledged what he'd done to Nathan, hadn't confessed, hadn't tried to make amends for the life he'd destroyed. And Nathan was running out of money. The anonymous acts of kindness were expensive, draining his meager savings. He'd spent over $8,000 on Morrison's behalf, money he desperately needed for rent, food, his own survival. Nathan's friend and former teaching colleague, Maria Chen, was one of the few people who knew what he was doing. She'd been furious when she learned the truth about Nathan's forced resignation, and she'd wanted to help him expose Morrison publicly. But Nathan had asked her to trust him, to let him try this instead. Now sitting in her living room, after a particularly expensive week of anonymous generosity, Nathan admitted his doubts.
I'm broke, Maria. I've spent everything trying to make this man feel loved and appreciated, hoping it would make him realize what he'd done to me. But he hasn't. He's just becoming this bizarrely generous person who still has no idea of his own crimes.
Then confront him.
Maria urged.
Tell him who you are. Tell him everything.
And then what? He denies it? Claims I'm harassing him? I have no proof anymore. The school board sealed those records. My lawyer made me sign an NDA. If I go public, I lose everything and gain nothing.
So, what's your end game, Nathan? Keep being his fairy godmother until you're homeless? Until you've bankrupted yourself funding the good deeds of the man who ruined you?
Nathan didn't have an answer. But 2 days later, the endgame found him. Morrison came into the coffee shop, but not for his usual order. He stood at the counter looking directly at Nathan and said,
I need to talk to you. Please. 5 minutes.
Nathan's heart raced.
I'm working.
Then after your shift. Please, it's important.
Nathan almost refused. But something in Morrison's expression, desperate, broken, guilt-ridden, made him nod.
I get off at 4.
At 4:15, Nathan sat across from Gerald Morrison at a corner table, his hands shaking, wondering if he'd been discovered. If Morrison somehow knew. If this was all about to implode. Morrison looked at him carefully.
I know who you are,
He said quietly.
Nathan Park. You used to teach at Lincoln Elementary. I forced you to resign. I fabricated evidence against you. I destroyed your career and your reputation. And now, somehow, you're the person who's been secretly helping me for 3 months.
Nathan felt his stomach drop.
How did you know?
I didn't. Not for sure. But I started to suspect. Little things. The way you made my coffee so carefully. The way you watched me sometimes. And then I saw you talking to Maria Chen in the parking lot last week, and I remembered you two were friends. So I did some digging. Found the crowdfunding campaign for my car repairs. Traced the IP address to the library computer you used. It wasn't hard once I started looking.
Nathan said nothing. His whole plan exposed.
I need to know why.
Morrison continued, his voice breaking.
Why would you help me? After what I did to you? Why would you spend money you clearly don't have, making my life better when I made yours hell?
Nathan took a deep breath.
Because destroying you wouldn't have fixed what you destroyed. And I needed to believe that people could change. That there was still goodness in the world. I was drowning in bitterness. And I thought, if I could prove that even someone like you could become better through kindness, then maybe there was hope. For both of us.
Morrison put his head in his hands.
I'm a monster. Do you know that? I've spent 3 months receiving kindness I don't deserve, watching people be generous and good, and the whole time I've known that I destroyed a good man's life for nothing, for a favor to my nephew, for petty corruption. And you.
He looked up, tears streaming down his face.
You saved my life. Literally. I was planning to kill myself before the kindness started. I was alone and miserable and hated myself, and I thought no one would even notice if I disappeared. But then someone started caring. Someone started showing me that I mattered. And it was you, the person I hurt most.
Nathan felt tears on his own cheeks.
I'm not a saint, Morrison. I wanted revenge. I wanted you to suffer. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't become the villain. So I tried this instead. And honestly, I don't know if it worked. You're a better person now, but I'm still a broke barista whose teaching career is over. The kindness didn't fix what you broke.
Then let me fix it.
Morrison said urgently.
I'll confess. Everything. I'll go to the school board, the media, whoever will listen. I'll tell them what I did. I'll demand they restore your teaching license and your reputation. I'll make this right.
You can't?
Nathan said tiredly.
I signed an NDA. The school board sealed the case. If you confess, they'll sue both of us for breaking confidentiality. And even if you did confess, who would believe you now? You could claim you're just feeling guilty about some legitimate concern you had. There's no evidence anymore.
Then what do I do?
Morrison asked desperately.
How do I make this right?
Nathan thought about it. About what he actually wanted. Not revenge. Not Morrison's destruction. But justice. Real justice.
You become who I thought I was training you to be.
Nathan said slowly.
You become genuinely good. Not because someone is being kind to you, but because you've chosen to be kind yourself. You run that school with integrity. You protect teachers instead of destroying them. You advocate for children instead of using them as pawns. You spend the rest of your career being the kind of principal who changes lives for the better, not worse.
That's not enough.
Morrison insisted.
That doesn't restore what you lost.
No,
Nathan agreed.
but it prevents you from destroying anyone else. And maybe that's the real justice. Not punishing you for what you did to me, but ensuring you never do it to anyone else.
Morrison wiped his eyes.
You're a better person than I'll ever be.
I'm not.
Nathan said.
I'm just a teacher who still believes that people can learn, that they can grow, that they can become better. I've been teaching you for 3 months, Morrison. Now I need to know, did you learn anything?
Morrison didn't just learn. He transformed his entire life into a form of ongoing atonement. First, he used his connections, the same corrupt network he'd leveraged to destroy Nathan, to quietly advocate for education reform. He pushed for stronger protections for teachers accused of misconduct. Real investigations, not political witch hunts. Due process, transparency. He couldn't publicly admit his own corruption without legal consequences, but he could work behind the scenes to ensure no other principal could abuse their power the way he had. Second, he started a foundation, the Nathan Park Memorial Scholarship, though Nathan wasn't dead. The name was Morrison's dark joke acknowledging that he'd killed Nathan's career. The foundation provided financial support to teachers who'd been unjustly forced from their positions while fighting to clear their names. Morrison funded it entirely from his own salary, taking a significant pay cut to make it work. He wasn't wealthy, but he poured every spare dollar into the foundation. In the first year, it helped 3 teachers. By year 2, 6 more. Third, he did something that surprised Nathan even more. He became a mentor to his nephew, the one whose job placement had started all this. Morrison called his nephew, Tyler, who'd been teaching in Nathan's former position for 2 years, into his office and told him the truth. All of it. How he'd fabricated evidence against an innocent teacher. How he'd destroyed a good man's life to give Tyler an opportunity Tyler hadn't earned. Tyler was devastated. He'd had no idea. He'd accepted the position believing Nathan had resigned for legitimate reasons. Now he understood that his job was built on someone else's destroyed career. Tyler wanted to quit immediately, but Morrison stopped him.
No, the damage is done. Quitting won't restore Nathan's career, but you can earn this position. You can become the kind of teacher who deserves it. You can be so good that Nathan's loss, while still terrible, at least resulted in students getting an excellent educator.
So Tyler became Morrison's project. Morrison mentored him intensely, teaching him to be the teacher Nathan had been, patient, dedicated, innovative, caring. Tyler would never be Nathan Park, but he became a good teacher in his own right, one who understood the weight of the opportunity he'd been given and worked to honor it. And fourth, most importantly to Nathan, Morrison did something unexpected. He became Nathan's friend. It started awkwardly. Morrison would come to the coffee shop during Nathan's shifts, and they'd talk about teaching, about education, about life and guilt and redemption, and whether people could ever truly make amends for terrible things. Nathan wasn't sure why he allowed it. Maybe because after 2 years of isolation, of being unemployable and friendless, Morrison's company was better than loneliness. Or maybe because watching Morrison's genuine transformation gave Nathan something he'd lost: hope.
I want to help you,
Morrison said one evening, 6 months after their confrontation.
I want to get you back into teaching. There has to be a way.
There isn't.
Nathan said.
I voluntarily surrendered my license as part of the resignation. I'd have to reapply, which requires reference letters from previous administrators. Guess who the only administrator I worked for was? And even if I got a license again, my name is Poison. One Google search, and I'm done.
Then we change your name.
Morrison suggested.
Legally, you become Nathan Chen, or Nathan Kim, or Nathan anything else. You get letters from principals I know, people who will vouch for you as a favor to me. You start over in a different state where no one knows your story.
That's insane,
Nathan said. But he was listening.
It's creative problem solving.
Morrison countered.
Something you taught me to do. There's always a solution if you're willing to think outside the box.
Nathan thought about it. Could he start over with a new name? It felt like running away, like admitting defeat. But it also felt like possibility.
Even if I did that,
Nathan said slowly.
even if I somehow got back into teaching, would I be any good anymore? I've been out for 2 years. Teaching is like any skill. You lose it if you don't practice. And more than that, I'm not the same person I was. I'm angry and bitter and broken. Would I even be a good teacher now?
Morrison looked at him seriously.
Do you know how I know you'd still be a great teacher? Because you spent 3 months and thousands of dollars you didn't have, teaching me to be a better person. You haven't stopped teaching, Nathan. You've just been working with particularly difficult students.
Nathan laughed despite himself.
You're a terrible student. You required extensive intervention.
Exactly. Which means mainstream students would be easy for you. So yes, I think you'd be great. I think you'd be better than ever, actually. Because now you know what it feels like to lose everything, to fight your way back. That's going to make you an even more empathetic teacher.
Over the next year, they worked on Morrison's plan. Nathan legally changed his name to Nathan Chen, adopting the last name of his friend Maria, who supported the decision. He got reference letters from 3 principals Morrison knew, people who met with Nathan and were genuinely impressed by his teaching philosophy and methods. He moved to Portland, Oregon, far enough from his old life to start fresh. He applied to schools under his new name with a carefully crafted narrative. Career change, from business to education. Student teaching experience, documented, but at schools that no longer existed, conveniently. And in September, 3 years after being forced to resign from Lincoln Elementary, Nathan Chen started his first day as a 4th grade teacher at Riverside Elementary School in Portland. He stood in front of his new classroom, 23 students looking at him with the mixture of curiosity and judgment that all students gave their teachers on day 1, and felt something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. Nathan's first year back in teaching was hard. He'd forgotten how exhausting it was, how emotionally demanding, how many small crises needed managing every single day. But he'd also forgotten how rewarding it was. The moment when a struggling student finally understood a concept. The way kids would light up during a creative lesson. The thank you notes from parents. The feeling of making a real difference in young lives. He was a different teacher than he'd been at Lincoln Elementary. Less naive, maybe. More aware of how things could go wrong. But also more present, more grateful, more determined to make every day count. And he brought something new to his teaching: the kindness curriculum. Nathan developed a program called the Compassion Project, where his students did anonymous acts of kindness for each other and for the community. They wrote encouraging notes to classmates who were struggling, They collected food for families in need. They made cards for nursing home residents. They learned that small acts of generosity could change lives. His students didn't know the origin of the program, didn't know their teacher had spent months being an anonymous benefactor to the man who destroyed his career. But they learned the principle. Kindness is powerful. Transformation is possible. People can change. The program became so successful that other teachers at Riverside Elementary adopted it. Then other schools in Portland. Within 2 years, the Compassion Project was being implemented in over 40 schools across Oregon. Nathan received an award from the State Education Board for innovation in character education. He stood on stage, accepted the plaque, and thought about the irony. He'd been destroyed for fabricated misconduct, and now he was being celebrated for teaching children to be kind. Morrison called him that night. They still talked regularly, though no one in Nathan's new life knew about their connection.
I saw the award announcement.
Morrison said.
I'm so proud of you.
It's strange,
Nathan admitted.
being celebrated when I still feel like I'm just trying to make up for lost time.
You're not making up for anything. You're building something new, something better.
Morrison paused.
Can I tell you something? Tyler, my nephew, he nominated you for that award. I didn't ask him to. He did it on his own because he'd heard about your program and thought it was important.
Nathan was quiet. Tyler Morrison had the job Nathan should have had. Tyler Morrison was teaching the students Nathan should have been teaching, but Tyler hadn't asked for it, hadn't known the cost, and now he was championing Nathan's work.
That's good.
Nathan said finally.
That's growth for both of you.
He wants to meet you.
Morrison continued.
He knows about our friendship. Doesn't know the details of what I did. I've kept that vague. But he knows I wronged you somehow, and that you forgave me. He wants to thank you for teaching me to be better.
I don't know if I'm ready for that.
Nathan said honestly.
I understand. No pressure. Just know that the offer stands whenever you are ready.
A year later, Nathan was ready. Tyler Morrison came to Portland, and the three of them had dinner. The man who'd been destroyed, the man who'd destroyed him, and the man who'd unknowingly benefited from that destruction. It should have been awkward. It should have been painful. Instead, it was oddly healing. Tyler was earnest and genuine, clearly trying to live up to the opportunity he'd been given. He'd implemented the Compassion Project at Lincoln Elementary. His students loved him. He'd become the kind of teacher Nathan had once been.
I know I can never make up for what happened to you,
Tyler said.
I know my uncle's actions and my benefit from them caused you tremendous pain. But I want you to know that I'm trying to honor what should have been yours. I'm trying to be worthy of this position.
Nathan looked at this young man, guilty only of having the wrong uncle, and felt something unexpected. Not resentment, not anger, but something close to pride. Tyler was a good teacher, maybe not the teacher Nathan had been, but good in his own way. And the students at Lincoln Elementary were getting a quality education because of him.
You are worthy,
Nathan said.
You've made yourself worthy through your effort and growth. That's all any of us can do.
After Tyler left, Morrison and Nathan walked through Portland's night streets, two men forever connected by injustice and its strange resolution.
Do you ever regret it?
Morrison asked.
The kindness conspiracy. Do you ever wish you'd just exposed me instead? Destroyed me the way I destroyed you?
Nathan thought about it honestly.
Sometimes, when I'm broke or exhausted or remembering what I lost. But mostly no, because destroying you wouldn't have restored what I lost. It would just have made me feel powerful for a moment before leaving me still broken and unemployed. This way, I got something real back. Not my old job or my old life, but my purpose, my ability to teach. And weird as it is, I got a friend who understands what loss feels like and chooses to be better because of it.
I don't deserve your friendship.
Morrison said quietly.
Probably not,
Nathan agreed.
but I needed to give it to you anyway. For me, not for you. I needed to prove to myself that I could choose compassion over bitterness, that I could be the person I wanted my students to become.
They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Morrison said,
I'm retiring next year, stepping down as principal. I'm going to recommend Maria Chen for my position. She's brilliant and deserves it.
That's a good choice.
Nathan said.
And I'm planning to write a book about transformation, about guilt and atonement, and what we owe to the people we've harmed. Obviously, I'll change names and details for legal reasons, but I want to tell the story of how someone showed me kindness I didn't deserve and changed my life. I want other people who've done terrible things to know that change is possible.
Will you tell them the ending?
Nathan asked.
That the person you wronged is still teaching? That he found a way back?
Only if you give me permission.
Morrison replied.
This is your story too. I won't tell it without your consent.
Nathan thought about it. About other teachers who'd been wrongly accused and forced out. About people carrying anger and bitterness because they couldn't see a path to justice. About the power of choosing a different kind of revenge.
Yes,
Nathan said.
tell them. Tell them that sometimes the sweetest revenge is teaching your enemy to be better. Tell them that justice doesn't always look like punishment. Tell them that the person who wronged you can become your unlikely ally in making sure it never happens to anyone else.
5 years after Nathan Park disappeared and Nathan Chen emerged, the Compassion Project had grown into a national movement. Over 300 schools across 12 states had implemented the program. Students had performed over 50,000 documented acts of kindness. The data showed measurable improvements in school culture, decreased bullying, increased empathy, better conflict resolution skills. Nathan had written a book about the program, Teaching Kindness, a Practical Guide for Educators, that became required reading in several teacher training programs. He'd become a sought-after speaker at education conferences. But he never told the origin story, never explained that the Compassion Project was born from his own act of revenge turned redemption. That remained his secret and Morrison's. Morrison's book, The Weight of Kindness, One Man's Journey from Cruelty to Compassion, was published the same year. It was honest and raw and deeply moving. He wrote about being a corrupt administrator who destroyed an innocent teacher's career. He wrote about wanting to die from guilt and loneliness. And he wrote about how anonymous kindness from an unknown benefactor had saved his life and inspired him to change. He never named Nathan, never gave details that could identify him. But people in education circles read it and recognized the truth. Someone had weaponized kindness, and it had worked. The book became a surprise bestseller. Morrison donated all proceeds to teacher advocacy organizations and wrongful termination legal defense funds. He spent his retirement speaking about the need for due process protections and ethical leadership in education. And he continued his friendship with Nathan, now publicly acknowledged. They co-presented at conferences about restorative justice in education. They wrote articles together about transforming school culture through compassion. To the outside world, they were two educators passionate about the same issues. Only a handful of people knew the real story: Maria Chen, Tyler Morrison, and a few others sworn to secrecy. On the 10-year anniversary of Nathan's forced resignation, Maria, now principal at Lincoln Elementary, organized a small private gathering. Just Nathan, Morrison, Tyler, and herself. They met at the coffee shop where Nathan had once worked, where Morrison had once been oblivious to the man serving his latte.
10 years ago,
Maria said, raising her coffee cup.
a good man was destroyed by a corrupt system, and he could have let that make him bitter and cruel. Instead, he did something impossible, something beautiful. He turned his destruction into creation, his pain into purpose, his desire for revenge into a revolution of kindness.
To Nathan,
Tyler added.
the teacher I try every day to live up to, the man whose job I have and whose example I follow.
To the man who saved my life,
Morrison said quietly.
who taught me that transformation is possible even when you don't deserve it, who proved that the best revenge is not destruction, but redemption.
Nathan felt tears in his eyes.
To all of us,
He countered it.
for proving that people can change, that systems can improve, that justice doesn't always look like punishment, and that sometimes the hardest thing, choosing kindness over cruelty, is also the most powerful.
They drank their coffee and talked about the work still to be done, the teachers still being wrongly accused, the students still being failed by corrupt systems, the schools still choosing politics over protection. But they also talked about the progress made. The policies changed. The lives transformed. The ripple effects of choosing compassion over revenge.
Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd taken the other path?
Morrison asked Nathan.
If you'd exposed me publicly, destroyed my career the way I destroyed yours?
Nathan thought about it honestly.
I'd be angrier, more bitter. I might have gotten some satisfaction from watching you suffer, but I wouldn't have gotten my teaching career back. I wouldn't have the Compassion Project. I wouldn't have helped change hundreds of schools. And you wouldn't have become the kind of person who's now making education better for thousands of students and teachers. So no, I don't regret the path I chose.
Even though it cost you so much,
Maria asked.
the money you spent on Morrison, the years of struggle,
Even then,
Nathan confirmed.
because those struggles taught me something essential, that the person you become through hardship matters more than the revenge you get, that choosing to be kind, even to your enemies, is an act of radical power, that justice and mercy aren't opposites, they're partners in transformation.
Tyler spoke up.
I teach my students that now. Not the details of your story, they don't need to know that, but the principle, that when someone wrongs you, you have a choice. You can respond with equal cruelty, or you can respond with unexpected kindness. Both are powerful, but only one changes the world for the better. And which do your students choose?
Nathan asked, curious.
About half and half,
Tyler admitted.
because kindness is hard. It's counterintuitive. Every instinct tells you to fight back, to hurt the person who hurt you. But the students who choose kindness, they're the ones who grow the most, who become the most resilient, who change their communities.
Nathan smiled.
Then, the Compassion Project is working.
They talked late into the evening, these four people, connected by an act of injustice and the unexpected paths to justice that followed. They weren't friends in any traditional sense, but they were something more important. They were proof that redemption was real, that transformation was possible, that choosing kindness over revenge could create change that echoed across years and lives. As Nathan walked home that night, He thought about the teacher he'd been 10 years ago, confident, successful, beloved. That Nathan Park was gone, destroyed by corruption and cruelty. But Nathan Chen, the teacher who'd been forged in the fire of injustice and chose compassion over bitterness, was stronger, wiser, more effective at changing lives, precisely because he understood how fragile and precious those lives were. He'd lost years and money and his original name and reputation. But he'd gained something more valuable: the knowledge that he could survive injustice without becoming unjust himself, that he could be destroyed without being defeated, that he could transform his anger into action that healed rather than harmed. The kindness conspiracy had been his revenge, and it had been sweet beyond measure, not because it had destroyed his enemy, but because it had transformed him. Not because it had brought him back to where he started, but because it had taken him somewhere better. Gerald Morrison had tried to destroy Nathan Park. Instead, he'd inadvertently created Nathan Chen, a teacher who understood that the most powerful form of justice was the kind that made everyone involved become better people. And that was the real victory. Not punishment, not retribution, but transformation for everyone. 15 years after being forced to resign from Lincoln Elementary, Nathan Chen retired from teaching at the age of 57. He'd spent his final 13 years at Riverside Elementary in Portland, teaching 4th grade and running the Compassion Project, which was now active in over 1,000 schools across America. At his retirement party, his students, current and former, filled the gymnasium. Some were teenagers now, others in college, a few already in careers of their own. They'd all been part of the Compassion Project. They'd all learned that kindness was power. One former student, now a social worker, spoke.
Mr. Chen taught us that when someone hurts us, you have three choices. You can hurt them back. You can let it destroy you. Or you can do something unexpected. You can respond with kindness so powerful that it transforms both of you. I use that lesson every single day in my work.
Another student, now studying to be a teacher herself.
I'm going into education because of Mr. Chen, because he showed me that teaching isn't just about curriculum and tests. It's about shaping the kind of people students become. It's about giving them tools to change the world through compassion.
Nathan listened to his students speak and felt the weight of his unexpected career. He'd lost 5 years and had to start over. But these 13 years, teaching as Nathan Chen had changed more lives than his previous 12 as Nathan Park ever could have, because he'd been teaching different lessons. Lessons forged in the fire of his own suffering and redemption. After the party, after the hugs and tears and promises to stay in touch, Nathan drove to Seattle, to Lincoln Elementary. He hadn't been back in 15 years. Maria Chen, still principal there, met him at the entrance.
Welcome home.
She said, hugging him. They walked through the school together. It had changed. New paint, updated technology, a garden where the old playground equipment used to be. But it still smelled the same, still felt the same. Maria brought him to his old classroom, 5th grade, where he taught for 12 years, where he'd been the kind of teacher students remember decades later. The current teacher, a woman named Sarah who'd been hired 8 years ago, was arranging the room for the next school year. She looked up, confused, as Maria and Nathan entered.
Sarah, this is Nathan Chen.
Maria introduced.
He's a teacher from Portland, but he used to teach here a long time ago, before he moved to Oregon.
Sarah's eyes widened.
Wait, Nathan Park? You're Nathan Park?
Nathan was surprised.
You know about that?
Everyone in this district knows about that story. About the teacher who was wrongly accused and forced to resign. About how Principal Morrison fabricated evidence. It's taught in our ethics training now, as an example of what happens when administrators abuse their power. And how the district implemented new protections because of what happened to you.
She paused.
I'm so sorry for what happened. It was wrong.
Nathan felt something break open in his chest. His story hadn't been forgotten. It had become a lesson, a warning, a catalyst for change.
It's okay.
He said.
It was a long time ago, and good things came from it eventually.
Sarah looked at him thoughtfully.
Did you ever get revenge? On Morrison?
Nathan smiled.
Yes, but not the way you'd think. Would you like to hear the story?
They sat in Nathan's old classroom, Maria, Sarah, and Nathan, and he told them everything. The kindness conspiracy, the transformation, the unlikely friendship, the way revenge became redemption became revolution. When he finished, Sarah was crying.
That's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. You could have destroyed him. You should have destroyed him. But instead, you taught him to be better. And now thousands of schools are teaching compassion because of what you started.
Not because of what I started,
Nathan corrected.
because of what we all chose to continue. Morrison chose to change. Tyler chose to grow. Maria chose to advocate for better policies. You choose to teach with integrity every day. That's how real change happens. One person at a time, choosing to be better than the system that failed them.
Maria added,
Morrison is writing another book, you know, about you specifically, with your permission. He wants to tell the full story now, how Nathan Park became Nathan Chen, how the kindness conspiracy worked, how you used compassion as a weapon against injustice. He thinks it could help other people who've been wronged.
Will you do it?
Sarah asked.
Let him tell your story?
Nathan thought about it. He'd spent 15 years being private about his past. 15 years protecting himself from the shame and pain of what had been done to him. But maybe it was time. Maybe other teachers needed to know they could survive being wrongly accused. Maybe other people needed to know that choosing kindness didn't mean being weak. It meant being powerful in a way that destruction could never match.
Yes,
Nathan said.
tell the story. All of it. Let people know that Nathan Park was destroyed, but Nathan Chen was built from the rubble. Let them know that the best revenge is becoming so good that your enemies have no choice but to recognize what they almost destroyed. Let them know that justice and mercy aren't opposites. They're the twin forces that transform the world.
He stood and looked around his old classroom one more time. This was where it had ended 15 years ago, where his teaching career had been destroyed by lies and corruption. But it was also where something new had begun, where he'd learned the most important lesson of his career, that the teacher's ultimate lesson isn't what you teach students, it's what you become in response to your own tests. Gerald Morrison had tried to destroy Nathan Park. Instead, he'd given him an opportunity to become something better, to learn that revenge could be kind, that justice could be transformative, that the most powerful response to cruelty was not equal cruelty but unexpected compassion.
Thank you for letting me come back.
Nathan told Maria as they walked out of the school.
I needed to see it one more time, to remember who I was and who I became.
Who you became is remarkable.
Maria said.
You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into the best thing you ever did. That's not just revenge, that's alchemy.
Nathan smiled.
It's teaching, real teaching, where the hardest student is yourself, and the most important lesson is how to respond to injustice without becoming unjust. I'm glad Morrison destroyed me in a weird way, because it forced me to figure out what kind of person I wanted to be. And I chose to be kind. Even when it was hard. Even when it cost everything. Even when every instinct screamed for revenge. I chose kindness, and it changed everything.
He walked out of Lincoln Elementary for the second time. The first time 15 years ago, he'd been broken and humiliated and lost. This time, he walked out whole, healed, victorious in a way that had nothing to do with winning and everything to do with becoming. The kindness conspiracy had been his revenge on Gerald Morrison. But it had been something more. It had been his revenge on injustice itself. His proof that cruelty didn't have to beget cruelty, that broken people could build beautiful things, that the world could change one act of unexpected kindness at a time. And that was the real lesson. Not that kindness always wins, but that choosing kindness makes you the kind of person who deserves to win, who becomes victory itself, regardless of the outcome. Nathan Park had been a great teacher, but Nathan Chen had become something more, a living testament to the transformative power of compassion. A walking lesson in how to respond to the worst humanity offers with the best you have to give. That was his legacy. Not the students he'd taught, or the awards he'd won, or the books that bore his name. His legacy was simple. He'd proven that the kindest revenge was teaching your enemy to become your friend. And in doing so, he taught thousands of others that justice could heal instead of harm, that mercy could be powerful instead of weak, that choosing to be good in the face of evil was the most radical, revolutionary, transformative act a person could perform. The kindness conspiracy had begun as revenge, but it had become something far greater. A blueprint for changing the world, one compassionate choice at a time. And that made every moment of suffering worth it.